Are GPS systems under threat? Growing technology gaps, and the clever ways that thieves steal cargo. Pull up a chair and join us as the editors of DC Velocity discuss these stories as well as news and supply chain trends on this week's Logistics Matters podcast. Hi, I'm Dave Maloney. I'm the Group Editorial Director at DC Velocity. Welcome. Logistics Matters is sponsored by Werner. In cross-border shipping, experience is everything. With more than 25 years of trusted expertise in Mexico, Werner moves your freight seamlessly across the border. Their bilingual teams handle the customs and compliance, so you don't have to. Get the reliability that your supply chain deserves. Become a customer today at choosewerner.com. As usual, our DC Velocity senior editors Ben Ames and Victoria Kickham will be along to provide their insights into the top stories of this week. But to begin today, many of us rely on GPS satellite technology every day. But what we may not realize is that these important systems are vulnerable to criminals, hackers, and a range of other bad actors. The potential for harm is real. Recently, I spoke with Lisa Dyer, the Executive Director of the GPS Innovation Alliance, about these potential threats to our GPS systems and what can be done to secure them. Here's our conversation. Welcome, Lisa. It's good to have you with us today on Logistics Matters.
Thank you for having me, David. I'm excited to be here.
Our pleasure. To begin today, can you tell us a little bit about the work of the GPS Innovation Alliance?
Absolutely. I am proud to represent companies that both build satellites as well as the receivers and devices that take the signals from the satellites and turn it into information you and I can use and make important decisions about. The organization consists of companies that have made multi-billion and multi-trillion dollar business units and or companies that depend on those signals from the Global Positioning System or GPS satellites. And then we also have a startup that I'm really excited about that's building a company that'll make a commercial version of GPS. So really exciting times for us.
That sounds great. And I have to tell you, I'm somebody who thinks that GPS is one of the greatest inventions of the last few decades. As someone who is old enough to have gotten lost a lot, I drive quite a bit. And I've had my share of getting lost. I rely on a GPS all the time. And most of us, I think, take it for granted that, we just get into our car and we navigate with a GPS now. Of course, we know the system uses signals from satellites, but for us non-engineers, people like me, can you briefly describe how GPS actually works?
Absolutely. And I agree with you 100%. I put GPS up there really close to the internet as one of those amazing inventions. And thank you to the US government for investing in both and getting those available to us. The spin-offs, the commercial spin-offs are just phenomenal. Like you said, you and I depend on it every day, often in ways we don't think about. The satellite sends three different signals in one direction from space to Earth. One, it tells you where you are located on the Earth. The other signal they send tells you how to get from where you are now to where you want to be. And then a third signal that most people don't really recognize or understand, but is vitally important, is a very precise timing signal within a hundredths of a billionth of a second. And those timing signals are what make our electrical grid work. It's what makes Wi-Fi work. It synchronizes the transmissions of those signals so that you and I can flip on a light switch and we immediately get electricity. We can connect our phone or our computer to Wi-Fi and be connected with people around the world. So those three signals are coming from space in one direction. The receivers and devices, that some of them that we think of like an iPhone or those that are embedded in aircraft or trucks transporting goods across the country, even trains, those are giant ears on the ground listening for those signals. And once they get signals from at least four different satellites, the chip in the receiver and device works with the software to turn that into information that you and I can make decisions about. So really exciting technology, very simple one-way transmission from space, and that receiver and device listening for it, turning it into information you and I can use.
So you said it uses four satellites, so it sort of triangulates or quadrulates or how whatever the term would be for that. It that's how it's able to determine its position by the distance and the variance of those satellites. Is that correct?
That is correct. It's something called translateration, I believe is the technical term. But yes, the irony is the most important signal in that is the timing signal. That's
Hmm.
where they build the where you're located and how you get from point A to point B into space. The receiver is taking those timing signals and measuring from where the distance of the satellite to the receiver to really pull that into information. That's great for
Yeah,
you.
and it's highly accurate. I know when I drive, I almost always get to the my destination on the time that they thought I was going to get there. So that's it's kind of crazy how well that works.
Really is, really is.
So we're here to talk about the vulnerability of the GPS systems and how they can be spoofed and jammed, and other things might be potentially able to destroy or interrupt this system. So how vulnerable are we really to something that we rely on every day?
You know, in some parts of the world, they are seeing an increased incidence of jamming and spoofing. Now, let me just say, any system on this earth can be interrupted, right? We have invested a lot of money into cyber capabilities so that, the bad actors that really want to mess with your computer and other systems from a cyber standpoint can't get to you, right? Any radar, all kinds of systems are vulnerable. GPS is vulnerable in somewhat of a unique way. Those satellites that are orbiting the Earth, there are currently 32 on orbit right now, are in what's called medium Earth orbit. And that's about 275,000 football fields laid end to end up into space. They're about 20,000 kilometers up there. And because they are so far out into space, the time that the signal gets to Earth, it is a very, very quiet signal. So quiet that if it were a signal that our ears could detect, it would be below that noise floor. And so that signal is easier to interrupt if you are intentionally, or in some cases, unintentionally interrupting the signal. So the way that people who are interrupting the signal is they are interrupting the signal before it gets to the receiver or the device that's listening for it.
So are most of these threats coming from foreign nations or terrorists or simply someone wanting to kind of destabilize our systems? And they're typically interrupting the system as opposed to taking out the satellite or destroying the satellite in some way, I assume.
Correct, correct. We do have foreign governments who are interrupting the signal. We do have people, there was a famous case in New Jersey where they discovered someone who didn't want his employer to know where he was traveling. So he was intentionally interrupting the signal to show so that they couldn't figure out where he was taking breaks as he was transporting goods on the East Coast. Most recently, in March of 2024, there was just someone turning on a device that acted as a jammer that interrupted flights at Denver International Airport, for instance. They didn't realize they were doing it. By the time they located this device that they were using that was acting as a jamming device, they're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that that was what was happening." So you have a range of different actors in there that are unintentionally and intentionally interrupting the signals.
So we talked about jamming, interrupting,
Mhm.
spoofing. What are the differences between those and how easy is it for someone to actually manipulate the signals? And would it be just in a locale or would it be everything coming from that satellite that's interrupted?
Jamming is interrupting the signal, and it's usually done for a period, a burst of time, so that the signal is interrupted. Jammers can broadcast their interrupting signal over a wide swath of spectrum, or they can narrowly direct it in a particular part of the spectrum. Spoofers, on the other hand, are somewhat more challenging. In the digital world, they're known as scammers, people who are portraying themselves as something with information that's not accurate. in the physical world, in the case of GPS and the impacts that they're having to a number of our transportation nodes, particularly in Europe and in the disputed waters between China and the Philippines, what they're doing is they're sending a signal out into the air that mimics what's coming from the GPS satellite. And the person using the signal thinks they're heading in a different direction than they really want to head. And they don't realize that they're getting this wrong information until something else starts tipping them off that they aren't where they thought they were. So spoofing is actually a recent phenomenon. Until September of 2024, most of the aviation and maritime industry really didn't report seeing too much of it. It was very theoretical, but in Europe, it started showing up in a very big way.
Now, of course, when we use GPS in our cars, that'd be probably the worst thing that can happen is we make a wrong turn and just have to backtrack and correct that. But
Mhm.
we're talking about airplanes, defense systems, all relying on GPS. Are those types of systems just as vulnerable as the types of systems that we might have navigating our cars?
Let me start with the defense systems. So the GPS satellites send out two different types of signals. They're roughly called military signals and civil signals. The defense systems, the weapon systems that are going into combat or that are delivering um, uh, weapons on a particular spot on the earth, they are receiving encrypted signals. And so they are much more difficult for bad actors to interrogate or to jam or spoof those particular signals that are encrypted. Now, what most people don't realize is actually a huge part of the defense enterprise, particularly the U.S. Transportation Command, relies about 80% of their work relies on the commercial transportation industry to move people and goods and weapons and all kinds of things to forward deployed bases. And the commercial transportation industry largely relies on, much like our cars, relies on those civil signals that are unencrypted. And that, ironically, is the magic of GPS and what made all of these different companies into these multi-billion dollar companies using these free unencrypted signals from the satellites and turning it into this amazing information you and I can use. Um, Airplanes use those unencrypted civil signals into their receivers and devices, and those are integrated into aircraft. Those are highly regulated receivers that go into aircraft, whether they're a general aviation aircraft or they are a transportation-based aircraft, passenger and cargo. And so that is one of the areas that we are very keen on seeing the government take action on to stop the jamming and spoofing, to take either low or no cost actions and more expensive actions to try to make the GPS system more resilient to that jamming and spoofing, because there are so many public safety and economic applications for GPS, many of which your readers and your listeners are very familiar with.
Right. And it sounds scary if we have a world where we can't rely on the GPS or we're concerned if we're actually navigating where we thought we were going to go.
Mhm.
So bottom line, what can be done? Is it a matter of encrypting every kind of GPS signal, or are there other simpler fixes for it?
There are a number of different fixes. First of all, the United States has actually not made a statement that says this is a bad thing, right? Many European nations who are facing it every day in areas even outside of conflict zones, but particularly outside of conflict zones, such as the Baltic Sea or the Arctic, they are seeing it and they have spoken out about it. I know that a number of aircraft manufacturers are working hard to integrate some specialized technology to make their receivers and their entire systems more resilient to that jamming and spoofing. I would love to see the United States government say something that says, this is not good, you're impacting public safety, you're impacting commerce. Um, There are some great work that can be done in international organizations, such as the International Civil Aviation Organization, to try to address these issues as well diplomatically. In the GPS system itself, there are some items that we think would be really, really important for the U.S. government to integrate. And one of those is a signal that comes from the satellite or the ground station to the receivers and devices that authenticates the signal that's coming from the satellite, that says, hey, you can depend on this signal. It's the genuine thing. This is not being spoofed. This is what you know, so that those receivers and devices can marry that authentication signal with the actual signal and have confidence that what they're getting is real and they are still on the correct heading that they want to go.
So it sounds like it would be good to take some proactive measures before an incident occurs, which requires everybody to then have to do something.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one of the really exciting parts of GPS is how many different use cases there are of people that are relying on these signals. Some people, such as the digital construction or farmers who are using precision agriculture equipment, they need signals that can get them down to 1 to 2 centimeters in accuracy. You and I driving cross country, now that we've replaced those wonderful paper maps that we had, the regular signals that come in at about 2 meters accuracy, that works well for you and me, especially if we're taking a road trip across the United States, for instance. But understanding what are the right use cases and what are the right technologies that can be integrated into the GPS system, or in some of these new commercial industry applications that are building similar signals to help complement GPS so that there's some redundancy and resiliency in the system. Those are important things to do, to map out all those different use cases and what each one needs from a particular signal, to make sure that they can get what they need and it's available to them continuously and with integrity.
It certainly sounds like an area that needs to be addressed, and obviously something that's national security involved as well as just the movement of commerce. So hopefully something will get done.
Absolutely. National security, economic security, public safety. Those three big reasons are why we are here to really try to make the GPS system, and the new commercial complements, especially the ones that we think are the right complements, are what we are here to do and to let people know about. So I thank you for the opportunity to do that.
It's our pleasure. And we have been talking to Lisa Dyer. She's Executive Director of the GPS Innovation Alliance. Thank you again, Lisa, for being with us today.
Thank you, David.
Now let's take a look at some of the other supply chain news from the week. And just about every company in the globe is trying to figure out what to do about artificial intelligence and other digitalization efforts, where they can be deployed in their operations and whether it's worth the investments. But Victoria, you wrote this week about some new research that shows there's a considerable gap between these digital ambitions and actual execution.
Yes, that's right. So there's definitely a growing gap between the optimism and execution when it comes to digitally transforming our supply chains. And that just refers to the technology investments and other efforts companies are making to apply digital technologies across their businesses. This information comes from PwC, which recently surveyed 767 U.S. operations and supply chain leaders about their company's technology investments, artificial intelligence achievements, and the innovations they're making in their company's operations. The results are detailed in the company's 2026 Digital Trends and Operations report. Now, the report found that most companies are really just super optimistic about the investments they've made and where they stand in relation to their competitors. But at the same time, they say those investments haven't delivered on expected results.
Right. And that does sound kind of familiar from what I've been hearing. And it sounds like companies need to channel their ambitions into those actual results. Is that right?
Yes, and the report offers insights and strategies for doing that. And just to put some numbers to all this, So 85% of the respondents said they are ahead of most of their competitors in digital transformation, and that includes all those AI related projects we kind of mentioned. But 89% said those technology investments haven't fully delivered on expected results. And one of the main culprits is poor data quality. And that's something I hear frequently when I'm writing any technology or automation story. 87% of those surveyed for this report said that poor data quality has affected their organization's ability to achieve value from their digital initiatives.
Yeah, you're right. We do keep hearing that same refrain that any good results from a digital strategy really comes down to the quality of the data that you're working with.
Yeah, it just makes sense.
Yeah, thank you, Victoria.
You're welcome.
And Ben, cargo theft continues to be a problem that plagues the freight industry. And now it seems that as new methods of prevention are being deployed, these are simply countering them in new creative ways.
That's exactly right. We've been covering cargo theft more and more in recent months. We keep on hearing about this. But it's really not the same story. That this thing is sort of constantly evolving here, on a day-to-day basis, aside from some of the high-profile examples that you see in the newspapers. It happens very often. And one reason is that these thieves are just constantly becoming better at being criminals. We saw a report this week from Verisk CargoNet. Now, this is kind of a good news, bad news story. In the first quarter of 2026, thieves in the US and Canada committed fewer heists, but they were targeting more valuable goods. So a higher value of cargo got stolen. The report said that the thefts of categories such as building materials and apparel and vehicle-related shipments, those things declined year over year. That means compared to first quarter last year. Because those goods are bulkier, they're less standardized, they're more difficult to resell at scale. But meanwhile, there was the quarter's sharpest increase was in personal care and beauty products, which evidently are very much easier to resell. And the largest overall theft category is food and beverage. The composition of stolen stuff shifted a little in there. The beverage part declined, while for some reason seafood targeting climbed up sharply.
Those are interesting categories. Did the report say anything about how the thieves are stealing these loads?
This part is where it got really interesting for me. So, as I said, we've been covering this for a while now, and there are certainly anti-fraud solutions that the industry has deployed across the industry, and those have been effective. But as we're saying, we're seeing that thieves are evolving their approach to get around that faster than these fleets are adjusting their defense mechanisms. So the Verisk report described two specific methods. One they called credential harvesting. That basically means they hack into email or smartphone accounts through spam and phishing campaigns. And then they take over the legitimate credentials that the carriers and the brokers use to find shipments and to verify identity. So imagine if somebody's using your email and you have a business partner who trusts you, then they think that you're the actual partner there. So in that case, the thieves are acting as a legitimate carrier, and they even communicate with freight brokers and they redirect loads. The second method that Verisk described is just outright acquisition of motor carrier businesses. Criminal networks are purchasing legitimate carriers, and they can do that because you can make these buys through unregulated online spaces. They gave some examples like social media, peer-to-peer marketplaces, some specialized brokerage services. I guess this is a good time to remind listeners that the US and Canadian trucking industry is very, very fractured. They're the top 15 or 20% are the big fleets that you might recognize the names on the road, but 75 or 80% are just one truck, or I think five and fewer. But again, these organized criminal networks, once they actually acquire a motor carrier business, now they're operating a business that had actually established trust in business with shippers and brokers. So now when that business gets a new load, it's not a fraudulent carrier. It's the actual carrier. It's just that it's owned by someone different. So those anti-fraud solutions we talked about aren't really effective anymore.
Right. That's incredible. I guess it just comes down to making sure you know the people that you partner with and assuring that they're trustworthy and legitimate.
That's what it comes down to. I mean, it really comes down to a people business in the end.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you, Ben.
Glad to.
We encourage listeners to go to dcvelocity.com for more on these and other supply chain stories. Also, check out the podcast notes section for some direct links to read more about the topics that we discussed today. And we'd like to thank Lisa Dyer of the GPS Innovation Alliance for being our guest. We welcome your comments on this topic and our other stories. You can email us at podcast@agilebme.com. We also encourage you to subscribe to Logistics Matters at your favorite podcast platform. Our new episodes are uploaded on Fridays. And a reminder, Logistics Matters is sponsored by Werner. In cross-border shipping, experience is everything. With more than 25 years of trusted expertise in Mexico, Werner moves your freight seamlessly across the border. Their bilingual teams handle the customs and compliance, so you don't have to. Get the reliability your supply chain deserves. Become a customer today at choosewerner.com. We'll be back again next week with another edition of Logistics Matters. Be sure to join us. Until then, have a great week.